course of our nation's history, the people of Boston have rallied bravely whenever the rights of man have been threatened. Today, a new crisis has arisen. Citizens, hear me out. This could happen to you.
One, two, one, two, one, two.
Microfoni, incredibile. Ok.
Funziona, funziona.
Pronto.
Siamo già online? Buongiorno.
Pronto.
Vabbè, on commence.
Ça marche pas.
No.
Let's start, yeah.
Non, ça marche pas. Ça? Oui? Non?
Buongiorno a tutti.
All right, we're ready.
Ready?
Ready? It works or no? It works. Yes, you actually
Oui, c'est bon.
Ouais, ça marche. Top.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Alors,
All set, all set.
I'm having trouble with French, Italian, and English, but still.
We'll do this in English, huh?
Yeah, we'll do this in English. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first talk of Vicenza Autovio Vintage. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Andrea.
I'm Andrea Casalegno, Iamcasa, and here I am with Joël Laplace, Lorenzo Maillard, and Alessandro Fanciulli.
Nice to be here.
It's really a familiar thing, but good. And today, the title of the talk, of course, is Collecting Out of the Box. And from looking at us, we can see that we're out of the box somehow, Joël especially. And
Joel doesn't know what a box is.
Yeah. Jokes aside, I try to bring three people that are kind of different in the watch industry, meaning that they will tell us now what they're about and their taste, because I met these guys in random situations in Geneva, and I was interested from the first time about what they had on the wrist and their way of collecting and carrying out a passion. So first of all, starting with Joël, who is on my right.
Thank you.
What do you do for a living? Like, why are you in the watchmaking business, and how did you get there?
Yes, so first, thank you, Andrea, for inviting us in Vicenza. It's our first time with Lorenzo to this place. Fantastic. So I started with watches like more than 15 years ago.
Okay.
So I started to collect watches, especially for the design. And I will keep it simple. So I work in the watch industry for now 7 years. And actually I'm working for Zenith Heritage Department in Le Locle. And I work 80% for them and 20% for me. So I sell vintage watches, but affordable. So the prices are between 1,000 and 2,000 Swiss francs. Sometimes I have more high pieces like Alessandro, but he will explain you it's another range of business, and especially sell watches to young people, young enthusiasts, and people who wants to have their first vintage watch. And I'm always explaining that you can get a really nice vintage Swiss watch, like mechanical, automatic or on-wound for like, I don't know, 1,000, for example. So it's very important to explain to the people you can have a lot of pleasure with something simple. You have a lot of quality for the money, you know. So sure. Because when you're here, you see a lot of very, very nice watches, but it's another world. You have
sure.
Of different worlds in the watchmaking collection, and for the affordable prices, you can get a lot of things.
But are these the things you buy for yourself as well? Because I see a pretty nice Piaget here.
Yes, of course. For example, you can get super nice Piaget in gold with manufacturing movement for 2K.
Yeah.
That's true. And for all those watches made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, for example, a simple Piaget, 3 hands with the automatic movement 9P, at the retail price was like, I don't know, 6,000-7,000 in 72. And today you can get the watch for 2,000, like new old stock.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. It's for us, I think it's the subject of your talk, thinking out the box.
Sure. And collecting foremost.
Of course.
And you, Lorenzo?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different story because I'm not a dealer. So I'm in opposition to these two guys. I don't sell watches, but I've been collecting since I was around 16 or 17 years old. Mainly only vintage watches. Actually, I never bought.
Still?
I started with like really cheap watches, and that's an advice. Really start really low. It's a good advice. And then I did my studies and I finished. I ended up at the Fondation de la Haute Horlogerie in Geneva, where I work in the content department. And lately, we launched something that is called Watches in Culture. So it's the cultural part of the foundation. And our main goal is really to attract new audiences into the watchmaking industry and talk to younger generations with their codes, their way of seeing watches, their references, and maybe get away a bit of the traditional marketing ways of the industry and refresh up a bit the way we talk about watches, make like cross-referencing with other universes like fashion or
sure.
other industries. And I think it's really important because the watch industry has structured itself around luxury, the idea of luxury, and it's a good thing and it has to stay. But luxury is evolving. If you compare it to fashion, luxury has evolved a lot, and we need to do the same with watchmaking, I think.
Yeah, I think the same. And it's good to have young people because the whole concept of the talk was to talk to young people as well, and I'm happy to also see some. And last but not least, the yellow guy of today.
Yeah, I thought I'd bring some sun to the talk.
You always do.
Thank you for having us. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. I also started when I was younger, just collecting. I think just like these guys, we all started with smaller watches, finding a piece that would give you a lot of pleasure, irrespective of price and range and everything. It's a question of aesthetics. It's a question of your own taste, finding something that nobody else has. I think those are qualities that all of us look for in watches. And yeah, it just evolved and it became an obsession, and then here we are today, and very happy about it.
Yeah, awesome. And what I like about the three of you is that you all have different tastes in terms of watches, and you approach, in my eyes, watchmaking in a different way. I mean, as we said, you work for a big company, you work for a company that is like working for every other company to keep all together, and you source fine pieces, and from just looking at your arms we can see a different taste. So for me, yeah, sure. And to me, you all have a different approach to collecting, because today's almost about collecting. What I wanted to give the audience through your words is that you told me how you started, but looking at all your profiles like Instagram, social medias, and also getting to know you a little bit better, you, as I said, approach collecting in a different way. So what does a watch represent for you all today? Like, what is a watch for you, and why do you decide to buy a certain piece? And also, what do you think a watch is about for a youngster like us? I mean, whoever wants to start is good.
I can start. Maybe I think what is interesting about watchmaking is like first thing you have to know is watches are useless. It's if you understand this as at the beginning of your
Because
journey.
that's what changed.
Absolutely, and that's how do you say? It's not because people tend to be really I don't know, getting their minds a bit up with the luxury and prices and watches. And if you think that watches are not useful, then you have another mentality about collecting and about watches. And you start looking for design, for little details, for things that are different and not just the price and the value on the market. And that's something that is really important also for the younger generations, I think.
Yeah, touching base on what he said, I think we're mostly vintage collectors. So for us, we're actually buying pieces from an era in which watches were actually useful. Whereas
Sure thing.
today, it is no longer the case. And I think, you know, when you buy a military piece with a military history that was assigned to somebody that has a whole story, has a whole like life behind it, like we're buying into that. You know, you're just a guardian of a piece that survived 100 years without you, and it's, you know, to us a big pleasure because there's a lot of emotions and morals. But of course, today watches have become a statement, a fashion piece. It's also like a, you know, you have a 5711. It says something about you on an economical level, which is good, but it's also getting to the point of saturation where younger guys say, okay, I have 100K to spend on a watch, but I'd rather buy something cool that says a lot more about my aesthetic values compared to like just my wallet.
And do you read the time from your watch, or you just use a phone?
Honestly,
No, Andrea, it's only with the iPhone.
absolutely.
You know that's for
Yeah.
every of us.
That was unexpected, though. But still,
We're a bit too broke to service our watches, so most of the time they don't work.
because that's what it's all about. And it's interesting. You said that we buy watches from a time in which they were useful, but compared to nowadays, we all can agree about the fact that we look for aesthetic, and that maybe the younger generation looks for aesthetic, right?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
of course. And for me, the really important thing, and I think it's the same for you, when you buy a vintage watch, I'm really attached to the facts they were really made in Switzerland. You know, because the Swiss made is another. We can organize a talk about the Swiss made, but when you buy a vintage watch, it can be a Tissot or a Patek Philippe made in the 40s.
It was made in Switzerland.
Everything, the case, the dial, the metal bracelets, they were made in Switzerland with a lot of different suppliers. Yeah. And today, when for some watch brands, you pay like 6,000 Swiss francs, and it's true, the watch is really Swiss made. But for some, it's not the case. And when you buy a Tissot or an Omega or a Longines from the 40s, it's the real Swiss made, and you can have the watch with an infinite lower price than the new one.
And the attention to detail is something that is really spot on. If you look at watches from the 30s or the 40s,
Yes.
even like what Jojo said, the like Tissot or brands that today are more of a entry level market prices. Back then, they were really all the same suppliers with a lot of attention to detail, and all the cases were finished mostly by hand or like with high-end manufacturers. So it was really something important, and that's what makes vintage watches interesting. And the detail is interesting because you can go deeper in the details. There were so many different references, and it's endless.
And for the price you pay, you buy a part of history.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
For us,
That's
it's
for sure.
And if you take into consideration the way the industry was structured at the time, so you had suppliers of cases, suppliers styles, you can find, for example, a Doxa watch that was made by Bourgel with a Bourgel case that's exactly the same as the one Patek was using, and probably a Stern dial, which is also the one Patek was using. Of course, the movement is not the same quality, but you have 90% of the aesthetic construction on par as Patek for about 1,000th of the price. And that's something I think young collectors should look into because, you know, you're objectively buying a beautiful thing. So I think there's a lot of space for young collectors once you go do some research and find out about the beautiful parts of all this.
Good. It would have been the last question, but let's not be the last question. So, would you suggest to a young collector, and I think I already know the answer, but I like you to get it on record, you know? Would you suggest a young collector to focus on vintage? Like, I am a youngster that's approaching watchmaking today.
Yes, for sure, because, you know, I sell watches to people who are new to this world, and I understand sometimes they're afraid about, for example, the spare parts. If my watch doesn't work, what can I do? But I explain to them for like big brand like Longines, Omega, Zenith, the industry produced so many pieces, millions of pieces. So for simple three hands models,
You'll always find.
And for the spare parts, for the habillage, for the dials, hands, I agree, more difficult, but it's like a car. You will find the spare parts, so it's not a big deal. So of course I will suggest to be more interested by vintage and collect at the end the vintage watches.
Yeah, absolutely, because vintage is a lot more exciting because you're buying something, you can buy something that is pretty cheap, that is unique because you're not going to see someone else in the street wearing the same watch as you do. And also, it tells something about you because it tells a story. It tells that you're into history, knowledge, and it tells a lot about you and your lifestyle. And it has so many different styles in vintage. I mean, we mentioned the 30s and the 40s, but nowadays, if you look at younger generations that are maybe 20 years old now, they're really into 90s watches.
True.
And a few years ago, we would say that 90s watches were ugly and disgusting, and now it's becoming, it's rising up. So it brings the question, what is a vintage watch? That's another topic. But yeah, for me, for example, my collecting journey is really different. I started with 1930s and 1940s watches, but now I want to have the most eclectic collection ever. Like I want to have design watches from the 70s that are maybe $50 in a flea market. And also a watch that is from the 90s or something that I would have never known. A Tiger from the 90s. You would ask me a few years ago, what do you think about it? This shit, it's not a watch interesting for me. And now I can change a bit my mind on it. So it's always evolving. So that's really interesting about vintage. It's an endless story.
And that's really interesting for the three of you as well, because I met Joël pretty randomly. I met you with like 30s and like chronographs. I met Ale with all these Paul Reuters. But now, I mean, Ale is wearing more bracelets than watches. I always see you with a super particular Royal Oak, which is not the exact Royal Oak you would expect. I see you with super colorful stuff. So how did you evolve collecting-wise, and how did you get the knowledge to evolve?
I think I can speak for all of us. Collecting is kind of like a gene that you either have or not. And you're born with this love for something, and over the years you just decide to develop it or not. I think we all went down the rabbit hole and we decided to like really pursue this passion and evolve in it. And I think for me at least, collecting has been a journey through people, through places, through experiences that have shaped my aesthetic values. You know, everything is tied. The way, for example, Lorenzo has a crazy Bimmer from the 90s that probably now reflects his love for the 90s pieces, and he wants a watch to match that. Or, for example, I just fell in love with jewelry because it offers incredible value, aesthetic value, and it's very comfortable, and you don't have to worry about, you know, mechanics about it and everything. And I think over the years, you just focus on your aesthetic values. And with regards to vintage, things were made well back then. People loved what they were doing. Things were made by hand. Things were made with like aesthetic ideas that today we don't have, because today the industry is organized so that the designer at a watch company just graduated and, you know, he has no clue what watches are. He just knows how to make a design on InDesign on Adobe, and that's not what the industry needs. We need people who actually know about watches. And this is polarizing, and I speak on behalf of like a younger generation that looks at aesthetics, and it's not okay. The industry should innovate in terms of studying the core product. And when you go back in time and you see how things were made beautifully back then, you realize that's why we decided to focus on these things. And that's the journey we've had, has been like enlightening to us, and I can speak for all of us, to understand like why those aesthetic values we're so attached to today, because we notice that there's actually very specific, beautiful things about them that we can say, okay, this is objectively much better than what we see today.
But how did you get, like, I think that when you start, you know what everyone else does. So the basic models, the basic lines and the basic designs. But looking at also your wrist now, I don't see anything which is that cliche, that classical, that widely known. So how did you, you all work in the industry and you've been around for longer than me, way longer than me, but how did you get the exact knowledge? Like, did you study something particular, or is it just that you're all friends, and that's a great thing about you, like you can share this
Yes,
among you?
of course. Lorenzo is a bit different because he's not dealer, and for example, Ale and I, we are in a completely different kind of business, and for me, it's quite simple because I sell affordable watches. So, and in this range of watches, like I sell, like, for example, Mido, Movado, Longines, Omega, Zenith. But some people are looking for this kind of watches, like a lot of collector enthusiasts. But for those watches, there is no bad things related to the watches. So
Sure.
you won't change. Of course, you can change a dial on a Movado or a Mido, but
It's not maybe worth it.
Doesn't worth it, and it's not the case for brands like, for sure, obviously Rolex. So
Yes.
for me, there's less risk on my watches. And for example, if I have a deal with a big Rolex or something, for me, I will ask guys like Ale, because he's specialized in this kind of watches. No,
Or like Jasper, come on.
Of
on.
course, but
The big buzz is actually
Rolex are too low for Jasper, so I ask Ale.
True.
But that's true. On some watches, you have some risk,
But that's very interesting because
So you need deep knowledge about, for example, Rolex, and just Rolex Submariner.
yeah, sure.
and
It's very
style,
vertical.
Blah blah blah. And
Yes.
for vintage Piaget,
Yeah,
less risk.
true. But that's very
special
interesting.
shout out to Piaget. I think
Yeah, Piaget, if you hear us
Honestly-
in Geneva, please.
Yeah, you were
Beautiful brands
waiting
in
for
the
this
world.
moment, for long.
But
No, but
just to answer your question properly, I think because nobody's really answered.
That was
it.
rude.
There's a lot of research. There's a lot of independent work that goes into finding out about watches. You just start on Instagram. You just start online. I started with Houdinki back in 2010 when they were actually writing cool articles about vintage. Shout out Ben Clymer. Please bring the old Houdinki back. And it just evolved, and then you meet cool people around you, and you just surround yourself about similar-minded people who share the same passion, and you talk about watches, and then somebody shows you this, and you're like, oh, I fell in love with this, and then you go to a show, and maybe you pick up a watch that you've never looked at, and you can objectively make evaluations, say, okay, that's beautiful to me, and it just perpetuates, and it's something that, like, we live this job. This is
True.
not a
It's not a job, it's a
nine
li-
to
it's more
five
of a
job.
life.
Like, I work 24/7. I'll go to bed at like 2 a.m. with my Japanese client sending me a message like, hey, what do you think of this? And then
Okay.
so objectively it's like 24/7 breathing, living watches and everything. And of course, you absorb so much. We see thousands of pictures, thousands of watches every single day. And naturally you understand after I get about 100 Submariners, 200, 500 I see a day. So of course this is not a particularly interesting model to me. But then when you see a watch once in your life, you're like, wow, this is something really special. And then you can objectively make valuations about them. And, it's just something that like moves very organically. We're like a whole community, talking to you guys, coming to the show, seeing the show. Like it's always living, breathing watches, and it just evolves from there.
That's very interesting because you made two things clear to me, which are something I get asked about pretty often. And one is that with vintage watches of some type that are actually out of the box somehow, because the Mido and also Piagets are kind of something different from the wider audience models. There's less risk of getting a counterfeit or a wrong watch because when I tell people to go vintage, it usually happens that they say, but what if it's not legit? But you already answered to this, and that's really interesting. And also, from what I got from you, it's more about the people than about something written, more about that. So it's really the people that make a huge difference in the industry. And I'm happy about this because I think you all three make a good work in terms of getting people nearer to the audience and to the market. But what now it's about, I'm super curious because you all source very different watches, and I'm talking about the watches for yourself, not the watch the two of you sell or whatever. Where do you actually think it's correct to source them, and where would you look to? You can also say to Joël La Montre, huh? It's okay.
No, first, it depends if you enthusiast and you know a bit the market. But if you totally new to the market, I would suggest to ask maybe just advice to a dealer for your first purchases, or buy your first watch to a dealer. And then generally people who start with one watch, it depends. You have two kinds of people for me. They just want a vintage watch, they will buy one and they're happy, that's it. And I have other guys.
This is the dream. This is what we've never managed to accomplish.
Yeah.
Be happy with one watch.
Yeah, so they will buy 1, 2, 3 watches and then we discuss a lot. So after they will do their own research.
Sure.
And maybe they will come to me and say, oh, Jojo, I saw this watch, what do you think? And I will explain, yeah, you know, the crown is not good, and maybe the hands. And like we did a few years ago, you learn by yourself. Exactly. And then you can go on internet, eBay, Ricardo, and buy your first watches.
Yeah, I think time is knowledge, and you have to take the time to understand what you're buying, and it makes a lot of sense because not everyone has a collecting mindset, so it's not meant for anyone. But if you start low and start working your way through watches, it makes sense. And I think the power of our generation is also the wide variety of medium that we have. So it could be Instagram, of course, but also all the other online websites and also the physical ones, because we see a surge nowadays, not necessarily in watches, but also in fashion with thrift shopping and things like that. So the younger generation is also really interested into getting into a physical interaction to learn more. So all the flea markets, the thrift shops, and it's a really a new mentality that a few years ago, again, we would have said it's going to die because the internet was booming. And so I think the solution is a mix of everything. You have to mix the way you learn about watches, mix the way where you source them, and talk and discover watches and talk with people that you connect with, because some people will be really expert on a specific watch or a specific model, and that's fine, and others with completely different. So yeah,
I think it's quite important for people to take time. As Lorenzo said, you're buying something beautiful and timeless. Take a moment, study it. Don't be impulsive, but still premeditated. And I think, this world has so much to offer in terms of, if you go deep into something, there's so much beauty there. So why not take a moment to really go deep into it and learn about it? And then you can be as superficial as you want. If you just want something beautiful and you just want to buy it and wear it, that's also super cool. And you don't have to geek out about watches. But yeah, if you're a young guy and looking to buy a vintage watch, do some research, learn, speak to some people, but then also support those who help you out. For example, if you ask dealers or people a lot of information, maybe it's also nice sometimes to buy from them and support their business also, because it's also their time that goes into it.
It's okay not to be a geek. It's important, no? Because
it's true.
Because
it's true.
There's so many people in collecting that are pretending. They're just dropping some reference numbers and things like that. And actually, it's a sign. For me, it's a sign. If people talk only with reference numbers, it means that they don't know really watches. So it's more about your sensibility of getting into watches. So
And number one rule, you will never know anything about watches if you don't take them in your hands. Pictures, internet, Instagram, all this stuff, cool, you can learn a lot, but you gotta take the watch in your hand, you gotta look at it with your eyes wide open, take a lens, study it, really breathe it in, and then you can start talking about
And
this.
stay humble, please.
That's kind of a guide. That's kind of a guide.
It
No,
is.
but that's really interesting. Also because the two of you live in Geneva, which is the biggest luck a watch guy could have, and also a risk because maybe you lose the passion because you see too many. But for us, I mean, Ale travels a lot. I try to, but I'm not him, so it's harder for me. But still.
Shout out to Jasper's new private jet company. Thank you so much for letting
Come
us
on.
fly with it.
No, yeah, next time. No, Jasper is tomorrow for everyone seeing us. But what is your main suggestion for people to get in touch with watches and see them? Because for me would be auctions, for example.
Yeah, but of course auction. But honestly, I will suggest new watch enthusiasts to visit watch fairs, especially in Switzerland. You have some in, of course, you have Munich for the dealers, but I really suggest to go in Switzerland to visit fairs in Geneva, La Vallée de Joux. There is like 6, 7 watch fairs in Switzerland per year, and it's the I will say the real market, but you will find watches for 500 to 10,000.
So you're
I
not
don't know.
meaning like Watches and Wonders.
It's
More
a
about the
completely different world
Yes,
than
sure.
the auctions. And maybe for a guy who starts to collect, to be interested by watches, it's the perfect place because you will see a crazy variety of watches for all the prices and all the different qualities.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's not actually watch fair. It's more, we call it bourse in
Okay,
in
yeah,
French.
yeah.
So yeah, it's just a meetup of collectors and dealers, small places in Switzerland. It's actually Joël is absolutely right. It's a beautiful place to discover watches, talk with people because all the dealers are collectors normally, and also they are really knowledgeable. So it's a great place to start. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think as well as really interested into, I think we all see more than 10, 15 watches per day, at least in pictures, but at least 2 or 3 in person every day, I think. All of us. You do maybe even more because you have also to deal with them. And for me, personally, I find it kind of hard staying passionate in all of them, you know? In some of them, like the one Al is wearing and you all are wearing because they're very interesting, I can find something and they give me emotions and feelings. But are you, like, how do you keep the sparkle alive with passion?
I think
Seeing
it's
that many
fundamental. Like the most important part is to understand what you don't like, because then you can start to understand what you actually like. You know, you don't gotta love everything. Like there's a lot of watches I really couldn't care less about, and that's how you keep the sparkle alive. Just go and find what's exciting. Like you'll pick up a watch eventually. Like I've had weeks, months in which I don't pick up a single watch that I'm excited about. And then finally I pick up like a 100 € watch that I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever found. And that's, and also let's not forget to mix around. Watches are not just wristwatches. Watches are clocks.
That's important.
There's table clocks. There's, pocket watches.
Pocket watches,
That's the one. There's pendant watches.
Shout out to Balthazar de
There's-
Pury.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Yeah, true.
So yeah, you just also just be open to be surprised by what comes your way, and that's very important.
Yeah, it's actually what we were saying before. It's a journey, so it's basically like a relationship that you have with your girlfriend or boyfriend. It's
That's deep, huh?
so no, it's sometimes you are
Sorry,
sometimes it's
so
not good,
technically I have like
sometimes it's
100
better.
girlfriends.
No, but like it's honestly it's a journey. So you sometimes for a few months you're really disgusted by watches. You don't want to see any more new watches, and sometimes you fall in love with a new watch.
Then you go on Tinder.
and then you go on Tinder and you find a new watch. Exactly.
So Tinder is like Ricardo for us, or no?
It's
okay,
yeah,
cool.
it is.
Cool, perfect. So what's to kind of sum up? You all took different journeys, collecting wise, but you also took different journeys life wise. And I think that like it happens to many people. They start with vintage watches and then they all ask me, how can I work in the watch industry? Two questions. First one is, would you suggest them to work in the watch industry? And second is, how would you think it will evolve? So if I'm now in like last year of high school, what should I focus on? It depends on what you want to do, for sure. But
yeah, of course, and it depends where do you live. Of course, if you live in Switzerland, it's quite easy because all the headquarters are in Switzerland.
There's nothing else to do. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, except finance, but if you are in another country, of course you have watch brands, but with small offices. Like, it depends the brand, but you will go, for example, for Rolex Italy, you have to go probably to Milano, and there is an office. It's same for all the brands, but probably you will start in your own country and then join the headquarters in Switzerland. That's quite, it's the way.
Would you suggest it?
To be interested, and if you really want to work in this industry, you will find a job. If you really want, go for it.
I think you don't have to set too many boundaries, because it depends. Depending on where you live, it doesn't change a lot nowadays, thanks to internet and social medias. You can start your business in Mongolia, or I don't know, in Kazakhstan, just north, maybe not in North Korea, but the rest of the countries are. Yeah, you can start with. You can create an account to do things. You can sell watches. You can do a new type of media. You can do exhibitions. I mean, there's so many ways of introducing yourself to the industry. And that's the power of our generation, and we're really thankful to have so many of these powers, because back then you were, I don't know, in South America you could maybe become a dealer or an official retailer, but it was really tough. But now with Instagram you can be wherever. The competition is bigger because it's international, but if you find your market, find your way, you talk about watches and you're interested, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I also think there's so many angles you can approach the watch industry. I feel like with the modern stuff, with the new brands and everything, there's quite a homogenization of, labor. Like, you could be working in the watch industry, fashion industry, in the car industry. It's pretty much, I think if you're working in marketing there, it's like very similar jobs. So it doesn't require exceptional knowledge about the watch world, which is also, I think, reason why a lot of brands are, similar, and they're all under certain groups and stuff. So I don't think that should be a particular issue with regards to finding a job. But I think the more interesting part is there's so many angles you can approach the watch industry from, as an outsider, as an independent person, kind of like also what you're doing. You created your own job out of thin air. You literally said, okay, I will do something kind of radical and fresh, and and I think that's much more interesting today for young guys, because you didn't need any capital at the beginning. You could just invent yourself. And then, of course, as you grow and you want to develop, you will need that. But I think, to me, as a young guy, if you want to approach the watch world, it's probably more interesting to find an angle that nobody's doing, instead of going and applying competing with a CV for a marketing job at a company that, objectively speaking, it's going to be pretty much the same as any other company, because unfortunately today that's the way companies are structured.
Yeah, and maybe to wrap it up, in terms of the industry, I think there's also a need to get more of the younger generation involved into all the level of the industry. It could be marketing, it could be product development, it could be everything. But there's a real need to refresh up, to make the industry better, and it makes sense for all of us. So yeah.
And there's also a huge need for watchmakers, for what I
absolutely watchmakers, of course.
That's a beautiful job.
It's
going to be a fundamental job in the future with a lot of room.
With a huge risk of dying as well, because not many guys are into it, and not many people want to actually work with their hands.
And there's the problem of also understanding the prices of a service and the prices of repairing a watch. That's the first barrier. But otherwise, we also have friends in Geneva who are young and start repairing vintage watches, and the knowledge grows and the business grows. So we also have friends who launches their brand without any money, pretty much. I mean,
with Kickstarter and whatsoever.
So you can do. Imagine how would you have launched a brand in the 70s without money? So it's
impossible.
Pretty impossible.
True. So what was clear with the talk of today, for what I got is that you have to think out of the box somehow, both collecting and working, which was the main goal of it. And I'm really happy you made it clear for all of us, and you share with us a lot of knowledge. To conclude it, just a couple fun questions. The first one is, which was your first watch and what will be the next one for the three of you?
Of
That's
course.
interesting.
So my first watch was a Tag Heuer Formula One blue dial
Okay.
quartz movements, and
What's the next one then?
I will always remember the price. It was 790 Swiss francs. It was
Okay.
quite a lot for me because I was like 16.
Wow.
I was 16, man.
You splurged, huh?
I was 16, man.
I've never seen
Yeah.
you. I've never
And,
seen Joël spend that kind of
I
money
remember
since.
the advertising with the driver Kimi Raikkonen. He was wearing it like with this slogan, "What are you made of?" You remember from Tag Heuer. So, and the next one, it's on Ricardo, so I can. It's
I will not say.
online auction, so I can tell you the model. Okay?
Afterwards, we make a story when you win it. Okay.
Okay.
I think my first watch, but I was really young, is an Adidas watch. Really
Okay.
ugly watch, but I would love to find it again. And the first real watch that I bought was a vintage Seiko. So I already started with Seikos with like $50 a watch, and that started the collecting mindset. And the next watch, I'm looking forward to have a 1970s, 80s integrated bracelet, but not the Royal Oak and the Nautilus, but more something closer to a Piaget or all the let's say, the brands who worked, for example, Chopard, Vacheron Constantin, brands who really worked on gold, the work on the bracelets, so the handcrafted bracelets, and also the dials, so stone dials, things that are really different and unique, and the piece is just it's just bright and different and lively.
I guess I had a bunch of swatches when I was a kid, but the first one I really
No, you
bought-
told me it was Daytona Paul Newman.
this
True.
this was a gift though, so it doesn't count. The first one I think I really bought myself was on eBay. It was a Stowa. I bought it from like Czech
Okay.
Republic for 17 euros and 53 cents. I
Started
think,
young.
so.
Was it signed on the back?
It was. It had some blood stains on the back when it arrived. They still have the watch. It was a diver's watch with a funky dial, and it made me appreciate some things of it. I hate other parts, and then I think the next watch is probably gonna be something I fall in love with.
Yeah. Okay, but which one?
It's like a relationship. We said it.
You never know.
You
huh?
fell in
Ah,
love or
okay.
you don't.
You didn't fall-
It's
okay,
like
you
Forrest
didn't fall
Gump
already.
says, it's
Our
a
next
box of
girlfriend.
chocolate. You never know which watch you're gonna get.
Awesome. And before passing to audience questions, what do you think will be the next trend? Because don't say gold integrated bracelet with stone dial, because we all like them, and
Yeah, we have
They're
to buy.
already
We have
here.
to buy them before it's a set. It's a
true,
trend.
I know, but let's just name a characteristic of it. Just that. If you have one, because
Oh, can I just say I'm not a big fan of trends. Just buy what you love. Don't follow the market.
Agreed.
Don't speculate. Don't try to buy into something. 'cause
that's
it's
how
gonna
you make
pop
trends
and,
sometimes.
you know,
Real trends were built by passion people.
Yeah.
True.
And they weren't thinking about the trend. They were thinking about things they loved. So, trends is just a mirror of what's
it's like
people
what
love.
Andrew Tate says: don't chase the money, chase the cloud.
It's the best talk that we're gonna have so far. So
No, but yeah, some trends that are that I see rising up, and I'm not sure. I don't have the science in mind, but it's maybe designer watches. You for example, with
Pierre Cardin.
Pierre Cardin,
Yeah.
of course, but other like even like really strange watches from fashion designers in the 80s, 90s.
This is
Cheap,
from the 70s, I think.
Okay.
cheap watches, but yeah,
With good
interesting design. Yeah,
Great.
Yeah,
And also something-
unique aesthetics, like things that are a bit, bulky on the wrist. Like, wow,
Absolutely.
that's cool. I've never seen that before.
And another thing that we didn't discuss, a lot of people are telling you shouldn't buy quartz, you should buy only mechanical, like beautiful movement and stuff. I think
that's
it's
true.
wrong. It's wrong. Quartz is amazing too because it's part of the history of watchmaking. It's part of a really interesting part of the story of watchmaking. And quartz watches are really interesting actually. And if you get
And
deep
sometimes
into
you
it,
also have
yeah.
something special. Like, is it a Beta 21? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Well spotted, huh?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
So you know about watches then?
No. He told me before. That's
All
it.
right.
So thank
By
you.
the way, sorry, I also wanted to ask you a couple questions, if that's okay.
Oh, please go on.
So is that a crash on your wrist?
No, it's part of the out of the box side of it. Thank you for shouting out to the soft watch. And yeah, I think this is.
You created a trend, no?
Yeah. Don't know what I want to say about that, you know?
But to be honest,
Take
this
a good
green one is
example.
crazy.
It's a good example. It's a funky watch, different, not expensive.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, but still.
It's gonna be expensive. Don't worry.
No, but yeah, nevertheless, it's.
After this talk, thanks to you, it's gonna be expensive.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to me for that, but still, part of that, and also it's quartz.
He has
what
a web
we're-
shop if you're interested.
No, we sell through Joël Laplace for sure. And yeah, so thank you guys for being here. I really liked what you told me, and for everything else, you can follow them on social media. You have all their references, not here, but I will post them for sure. And I think they are all a great example of how you can build value and how you can build value for yourself and create passion for yourself. So if anyone has a question, I'm happy to. Yes, please.
Anyone else?
So if you look at the balance between aesthetics, mechanical, and history, what weighs heaviest for each of you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If you look at the balance between aesthetics, mechanics, and history, what's heaviest?
Again, it depends really. I could buy a watch just for design and with a name that is not interesting or a movement that is not interesting, and the other way around. I could buy a watch because the name is cool, because I like the brand, I like the idea, I like the period of time, the history.
I think it depends a lot on the watch. Like a true beat Rolex, you're buying that for the movement.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, it has except for like a cross line, it has nothing more than a Datejust. But of course, overall, like on my personal preference, aesthetics plays the most important role.
Yeah.
Like I care about mechanics up to the point that it's good mechanics. But for example, the Piaget today is quartz movement. It's a Pieta 21. It's an interesting mechanics, but I buy it mostly for the aesthetics rather than the movement. And it helps that the movement is very important. And you know, it's the whole ensemble. It's like a it's a 360 picture. But of course, aesthetics are the thing that people notice the most. Yeah. And of course, if you want to geek out, you can go into mechanics. And if you really, really care, the history like plays an important role. But it's very dependent on the watch.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yes. Awesome, guys. I think we have to leave place to the talk. So we'll do more.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Grazie a tutti.